like a bad habit, as if we never left. I am BlackRock ASMR, here to rock your ASMR world, and today, before we started the video, I wanted to let you guys know I don't do this often, and in no way should this feel mandatory, but I do have a Cash App. I do offer custom videos. I do 10-minute custom videos for $1, and I'll try my best to give you guys the best quality, but by no means should you feel obligated to pay me for the content, because I am doing this for, as they say, the love of the game. This is not a means of monetary gain. I would love to make money off this, but again, I'm not doing it for the money. But all donations to the channel are greatly appreciated, and they go back into the channel. But let's hop into it. Today, guys, I wanted to get on here and talk about specifically food, but even more specifically pineapples. And the reason I wanted to talk about pineapples is because I think pineapple is a good representation of how would you say, kind of food that we don't consider when it comes to the difficulty of obtaining, because a pineapple, or obtaining a pineapple for us, or for most of us, is as simple as going to a grocery store and grabbing it off the shelf and then taking it to a register or self-checkout and then handing the money over, and we have a pineapple. But it hasn't always been that easy, and as you'll learn throughout the video, it was actually quite the challenge to get pineapples worldwide. So without further ado, after my shameless self-promotion, let's talk a bit about pineapples. Pineapples are indigenous to the tropicals of South America, and I think I'll pull up a picture later in the video, but pineapples have not always been the fruits we know and love, and have not always looked like what we often associate pineapples looking like. But I'm going to be consulting my book, this little book that I have here, that has all of the information that I researched about pineapples. If you want to know more about plants, there is a guy on TikTok who goes by the name of Sean Grows, SHAWN, and then Grows. He talks about all kinds of plants. He seems very laid back and chill, but the home of the pineapple, or the birthplace of the pineapple, I was just telling you that pineapple was found predominantly in the tropicals of South America, but even more specifically, it is found on the Paraguay river basin that is believed to be the home of the pineapple. I believe that's where they found the earliest remains and earliest recordings of where pineapples are. And apparently, they believe pineapple cultivation may have started about 6,000 years from now. So, 6,000 years ago. So that's pretty cool. I feel like we don't think about like early farmers and what it took to cultivate food, but pineapple was not always this inviting sweet treat that was slightly acidic. These fruits had to be cultivated and selectively bred to be edible and to be the golden fruit that we know it as today. Let's see here. By the 1200 to 800 BCE, pineapple was already fairly global in the world. Well, I won't say global, but it had branched out. They were being grown in the coastal regions of South America, but by the 15th century, they had expanded to places like the Caribbean and the Amazonia and the Andes, apparently. So that's pretty cool. So it goes to show that pineapple cultivation was very much on the rise, and it was starting to be seen as this delectable fruit to be eaten by all. So that's really cool. And like I was saying earlier, pineapples before their domestication, I'll pull up a picture if I remember. But pineapples were much smaller before cultivation. They were spikier and less inviting to eat. Very much smaller, and they were seedier. I know that a lot of you have probably never seen pineapple seeds. Me either. Apparently, as part of the research, I learned that pineapples are typically grown by planting the crown. So that's like the top spiky part of the pineapple. Growing that, planting that in the ground. But I digress. Upon the arrival of the Spanish people, became enthralled and obsessed with this fruit. There were so many settlers that wrote back home about it, telling, their kings and queens who were sending them on these expeditions. Oh my gosh, this fruit is so amazing. It's so good. You have to try it. And, obviously being king and queen, they're like, bring us some, because they're not going to go themselves, obviously. But these explorers, they would go over here and they would grab these pineapples. But this was, like I said, it was, I think, the 15th century, which is it's like the year 1400. So they haven't industrialized yet. So when they would come back and have these pineapples would not be fresh anymore. They would start to rot, and just overall the quality of the pineapple was declining, and it wasn't fit for royalty to eat. I mean, the strategy was to pick an unripe one and try to bring that one back, but even then the quality just wasn't there. It wasn't as good as plucking it straight off the tree in the tropicals of South America. So how do you fix this problem? Ingenuity. So I know what a lot of you are thinking. How did they get it there? How did they manage to grow pineapples? As I don't know if most of you know this or not, but pineapple is very hard to grow outside of tropical climates. Tropical climates have a lot of rain, and they have warmer climates. It is very warm, very humid area. I don't know if you know this, but Europe is not. So they were not able to grow pineapples until the invention of what they called pineapple pits. The pineapple pit was the baby of a lady known as Agnes Block. She was apparently I think she was from the Netherlands. I think she was a Dutch horticulturist and art collector. And she decided that she was going to dedicate her time to figuring out how to grow pineapples in Europe. And through these things called peach pits, I said peach pits, didn't I? Through these things called pineapple pits, they were, let me see, I wrote down the dimensions here. They're about 4 to 6 feet deep. So, think of how deep those holes are that bury bodies. Terrible analogy, I'm sorry. But, and they were about 5 to 8 feet wide. And what they would do is they would line the walls with bricks. And, there would be a central hole within this wall of bricks here. And then, on each side of the beds, right? So, 4 walls, so there would be a central hole on holes would be right beside the bed of the pineapple. The pineapple beds would be in these holes, and they would collect the heat from fermented dung, which is like animal droppings, feces, tan leaves, and they would have these specific frames to get the adequate amount of light to cultivate these pineapples. And but eventually this would be replaced by stoves, which made it a lot easier to grow these pineapples. But just because pineapples were now being grown in Europe does not mean that they are going to be accessible. Pineapples were seen very much as a luxury item because it cost more money to grow pineapple than the amount of money people were getting paid to grow the pineapple. Let's see. I wrote down this fact actually. It would take 8 years for the people growing pineapple to be able to afford a pineapple at the price they were selling the pineapple for. Could you imagine working 8 years to sell a single working 8 years to try a single pineapple? That's insane. Imagine it takes 8 years. Imagine buying anything that takes 8 years worth of saved salary. And then imagine that thing being a pineapple. It's really hard to imagine, right? That'd have to be a pretty expensive pineapple. But let's see. I actually wrote down the conversion. It was $2,700 to buy a pineapple. At one point, it became I don't want to say the norm, but you could rent out a pineapple for certain events, big parties. If you wanted to look like a big baller, like you had money, you would go and you would rent out a pineapple. You weren't going to eat it. You were just borrowing it. And I think that is insane, to borrow food as like a sign of status. It'd be like if I went to what place sells caviar? I don't know. I feel like caviar is like a rich people food. It'd be like if I went to go buy caviar, and then they were like, yeah, cool, you can have it as like a centerpiece, but you can't eat it and you have to return it. And that's what they would do. That's what they would do. But that was until the advent of industrialization, where we got steamboats, which were a lot faster than wooden ships that the explorers were using in the 1400s. So it became less of a hassle to transport pineapple, and it became a lot more accessible to everybody, and the price slowly dropped. And I need you guys to understand how influential this fruit was. There are paintings of kings being presented with pineapples. There are paintings of Agnes Block, the lady. I kind of want to call her the mother of pineapples. I don't know if that's like an official title, but I kind of want to call her the mother of pineapples. There's paintings of her cultivating these pineapples. And there's buildings designed after pineapples. That's how influential this fruit was, and it's kind of crazy that, like, in today's time, these are just fruits. These are just fruits that people eat. And I'm not saying that, like, they shouldn't be eaten. I'm saying it's kind of like how the mighty do fall. How this fruit had so much status because of how exotic it was and how rare it was, and how only the most elite of people could afford to have them, to now being something that you could just buy at a store. But that's kind of like a crash course history of pineapples. But the video is not over yet, because I do want to talk about pink pineapples, or as they might be called, what is it? The rosé pineapple or the pink glow pineapple. it's self-explanatory. They're pink pineapples, y'all. But I want to talk about kind of like the brief, very short history of pink pineapples. I thought the history would be a bit more extensive when I was doing research, but apparently these pineapples are about the same age as me because they were being cultivated in the early 2000s, somewhere around 2004, 2005. And they were being cultivated by the fruit brand Fresh Del Monte. I'm sure we've all had Fresh Del Monte before. They're the people that make all the canned fruits and things like that. But yeah, these pineapples were being cultivated by Fresh Del Monte, and the goal of it was, between you and me, I believe the goal was to make an exclusive, kind of exotic, cool-looking pineapple. But the reported goal was to make sweeter pineapples that had less tart taste and were less acidic. Because I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people report having like a tingling or kind of like a burning sensation in their mouth when eating pineapple. That's because there's an enzyme breaking down the skin in your mouth when you're eating a pineapple. So yeah, the pineapple's also eating you on the low every time you eat one. But we've talked about kind of like why it was made. Let's talk about why it looks like that. Well, the thing responsible for the color of the pink pineapple is this thing called lycopene, which is also found in watermelons and tomatoes. The amount of lycopene present in things like watermelon determines the color of it, which is why when you see things like yellow watermelon, we have things like that. It's the amount of lycopene present within that fruit, and it is due to a mutation of the lycopene. But an accumulation of the lycopene within the, I was about to say the watermelon, but within the pineapple actually is what gives it that red hue. And as I said earlier, these were being grown in the early 2000s, but they weren't open to the general public until 2020. So it was about 15 or 16 years before these things became available to the general public. That's because they had to be approved by the FDA, and testing for that took years. And by years, I mean almost 2 decades worth of years. But yeah, they are very much safe to eat, and as I said, they've been reported to have a sweeter taste. And just a fun personal fact, not so much about pineapples, but so much about me. Pineapples are one of the only fruit that I can actually eat. Not in the sense of like I'm allergic to all fruits, but pineapple is the one fruit that I think tastes enjoyable and has a texture that isn't like god awful. But yeah, guys, that is the crash course history of pineapples and pink pineapples as well. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and leave a comment as well. I hope you guys have a good night's sleep. Thank you for watching my video.